You could feel the weight of the air that morning inside the Jackson County Courthouse. It was thick, full of judgment, full of expectation. The kind of air that lets you know something important is about to happen. At the front of the courtroom stood a young man just 19 years old. His name, Yellen Carter, tall, calm, dark curls tucked beneath a plain hoodie. His hands rested deep in his pockets, but his eyes were wide open, watching, studying, not scared, not even angry, just ready. He was facing serious charges. Grand theft auto and resisting arrest. To most people in that room, he was already guilty, not because they knew the evidence, but because they thought they knew his story, a black teen, a stolen car. It didn't take much for them to fill in the blanks. The judge, Walter Prescott, was already annoyed. He was known around town for two things: fast trials and sarcastic one-liners. He didn't see a young man looking for justice. He saw just another case slowing down his schedule. Judge Prescott peered over his glasses at Yellen, a smirk tugging at his lips. "You think this is the bait club, son?" he said, loud enough for the room to hear. Laughter echoed from the court staff, the audience, even the prosecutor, but not from Yellen. He stood still, that same steady stare, because deep inside, he wasn't new to this world. He had grown up around it. His mother, Cassandra Carter, had worked as a paralegal for over 15 years. While other kids watched cartoons, Yellen watched court videos. While they played video games, he read old trial transcripts. His mom always said, if you understand how the system works, maybe it won't swallow you whole. And now here he was, standing in the middle of that system, facing it head on. The prosecutor, Mr. Dale Henson, stood and strutted like a man, already celebrating. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "this is a simple case. Mr. Carter was found behind the wheel of a stolen 2022 silver Audi. There was a police chase. His fingerprints were on the steering wheel. An officer saw him driving. What kind of victim runs from the police?" More nods, more whispers. The case looked strong on paper, too strong. Yellen just stood there, his heart calm like still water, waiting, watching, listening. Then came a pause. The judge turned to the defense. A young, nervous woman stood up, Rachel Monroe, the public defender. She began softly, her voice uncertain. But before she could say much, Yellen gently tapped her arm. "Thank you, Ms. Monroe," he whispered. Then he turned to the judge. "Your Honor," he said, clear and calm, "I'll be representing myself." The room stopped breathing. Judge Prescott blinked, confused. "You'll what?" "I'll be defending myself," Yellen repeated. The silence was followed by chuckles, scoffs, and whispers of "this kid's crazy." But Yellen didn't blink. He stepped forward and took a deep breath. His voice didn't shake. "Before we go further, I'd like to make a motion," he said, eyes locking with the judge. "I request access to Officer Dent's GPS records from the night of the arrest." Henson rolled his eyes. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant." But Yellen didn't stop. "The officer said he saw me behind the wheel, but he wasn't even on duty yet. His GPS tracker proves he was across town when the chase began." The laughter stopped. The courtroom turned cold. Even Judge Prescott had to pause. He looked at the prosecutor. "Well, Mr. Henson," he asked, "is that true?" The prosecutor hesitated. "Too long." "We have no objection," he mumbled. But the damage was done. JLAN had just exposed the first crack in their perfect case, and everyone saw it. He turned back to the jury. His voice softened now, no longer sharp, just honest. "My fingerprints were on the car. That's true. I touched it. It was unlocked outside a gas station. I opened the door, leaned in. Dumb decision. But I didn't steal it, and I didn't drive it away." He looked each juror in the eye. "Tell me this. If you try on a jacket in a store, then leave, and someone else comes and steals it, should your fingerprints mean you're the thief?" It was quiet, so quiet you could hear someone shift in their seat. The jury wasn't laughing anymore. Neither was the judge, or the gallery, or Mr. Henson. They were listening. Because for the first time, the boy they thought they knew, this so-called criminal, wasn't acting like one. He was acting like someone who had done his homework. Someone who knew truth had to fight harder than lies. Someone who wasn't just defending himself. He was making them question what they thought they already knew. And in that moment, Yulin Carter stopped being just a defendant. He became a mirror. By now the mood in the courtroom had completely changed. The people who laughed before were quiet. The ones who rolled their eyes now leaned forward. The judge, who once seemed so sure of himself, was watching Yulin Carter with growing interest. And the prosecutor, Mr. Henson. His confidence had started to crack like all glassed up, because Yulin wasn't just speaking, he was teaching. And when truth walks into a room dressed in calm, steady words, even pride starts to listen. Jalen stood tall, shoulders back. His voice never rose. It didn't need to. It carried because it was real. He turned back to Judge Prescott. "Your Honor," he said softly, "I have another question for the prosecution." Henson sighed, already uncomfortable. "Go ahead." Yulin took a breath. Was the forensic specialist who analyzed the fingerprints subpoenaed to testify today? The question seemed innocent, but it wasn't. Not at all. Judge Prescott looked confused, then turned to the prosecutor. Henson flipped his folder, scrambled a bit, and finally admitted, "No, they weren't." Yulin nodded, as if that's exactly what he expected. "So," he said, now facing the jury again, "the state wants to use fingerprint evidence against me without bringing in the person who tested it. No questions allowed. No challenge to how it was handled. No explanation about how clean or contaminated the sample was." He tilted his head. "Would that seem fair to you?" No one answered, but their silence said enough. Because it was never about fairness to begin with. It was about speed, assumptions, boxes to check. And Yulin, he had seen it happen to many people. But this time, they picked the wrong kid. He wasn't finished. "There's more," he said, reaching into a thin folder he had carried in himself. "I'd like to submit a copy of the original police report from the night the car was stolen." Judge Prescott gestured for the bailiff to collect it. Mr. Henson looked tense, his hands tightening into fists. The judge flipped through the pages, then looked up, eyebrows raised. "This wasn't in the prosecution's file," he said. "Where did you get this?" "It's public record, Your Honor," Yulin answered calmly. "I requested it myself." And then he read the part out loud that no one saw coming. "I left my car running outside the gas station," said the car's owner, Mr. Rob Whitaker. "Some kid jumped in and drove off. But it wasn't the guy they arrested. I saw him. The guy I saw was white." The courtroom gasped, loud, audible, like a wave of truth had slapped every wall in the room. Jalen stood still, letting it sink in. "That was never included in this trial," he said, looking directly at Mr. Henson. "Why not?" the prosecutor stammered. "The statement was unclear." "No, it wasn't," Yulin cut in, still gentle. "It was specific, and it didn't match me." And now the jurors were looking at him, really looking at him. His skin, his face, his quiet dignity. And they realized he wasn't even close to the description. So, how did this happen? Because Yulin had been in the wrong place, with the wrong skin, at the wrong time. And that was all it took. He turned to the gallery, to the everyday people who had come to watch just another trial. "You know what hurts the most?" he asked. "It's not being accused. It's not even being arrested. It's knowing that when they looked at me, they didn't care about proof. They just thought, 'Close enough.'" He swallowed hard, holding his voice steady. "This isn't just about me. This is about how easy it is to lock someone up when you're not paying attention. Or worse, when you just don't care." The room was frozen. Even Judge Prescott had stopped fiddling with his pen. His eyes, for the first time, weren't full of sarcasm. They were full of something else. Maybe guilt, maybe respect, maybe both. Yulin's last words in that moment weren't angry. They weren't loud. They were soft. Almost like a whisper to the hearts of everyone listening. "I'm not asking For a favor, I'm asking for the truth to matter again." And with that, he sat down. The courtroom stayed quiet for a long time. No one moved. Even the clock seemed to hold its breath. Because in a room where power usually speaks the loudest, today, truth spoke first, and people listened. When Yolande Carter finished speaking, the courtroom wasn't just quiet, it was still. Even Judge Prescott didn't know what to say at first. His fingers had stopped tapping. His usual sarcastic tone was gone. He stared at the young man sitting before him, this boy they all thought would be easy to break. But Yolande didn't come to break. He came to show them something they had forgotten. Truth. Mr. Henson, the prosecutor, tried to regain control. His voice was shaky now. "Your Honor," he said, "regardless of eyewitness statements, the defendant's fingerprints were still found on the stolen vehicle. That cannot be ignored." Yolande nodded, calm as ever. "That's true," he said, "but I was never inside the car when it was moving. I wasn't arrested behind the wheel. I was blocks away, walking home with sacks in my hand." He paused, then added gently, "Not every fingerprint is a confession. Sometimes it's just a mistake, a moment, a bad decision, but not a crime." He stood up again, one last time, and then he said something that made even the coldest hearts in that room soften. "I didn't come here today to pretend I'm perfect. I touched that car. I was curious. I was dumb. But I didn't steal it. I didn't run from the cops. And I didn't deserve to be treated like a criminal before I even had a chance to speak." He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, you wanted this to be quick. You laughed at me. But I hope you'll remember this case, not because I defended myself, but because I made you look again at how easy it is to be wrong." Prescott swallowed hard. He rubbed his eyes, took off his glasses, and for a long moment, he didn't say a word. Then finally, quietly, he spoke. "Case dismissed." No gavel slam, no shouting. Just two simple words that hit like thunder. At first, no one moved. Then, it all broke loose. Gasps, tears, murmurs. Some clapped. Some cried. Reporters scribbled. Phones came out. 100 voices asked 100 questions. But Yolande didn't say anything. He stood still, like a man who already knew what was coming. He didn't smile. Not yet. He just looked over at his mom. She had been sitting in the back, hands clenched hard in her throat the whole time. And now she walked toward him, her eyes full of pride and fear and love. She stopped in front of him, shook her head. "Boy," she whispered, "you scared me half to death." He chuckled, a small one. Then hugged her tight. "Had to take the risk, Ma," he said. She hugged him tighter. "You always do outside the courthouse." The air felt lighter, brighter. But Yolande didn't stop for the cameras. Didn't answer the questions. He pulled his hoodie over his head, kept his head down, and walked. This wasn't about being famous. It wasn't about showing off. It was about something deeper, dignity, justice, and something even more powerful, hope. From across the street, Judge Prescott stood watching. No smirk, no grin, just silence. He nodded once slowly, and for the first time that day, there was no mockery in his eyes. Just reflection. Because Yolande hadn't just defended himself. He made the court and everyone in it see their own reflection in the mirror he held up. How many others had been wrong this way? How many had no one to speak for them? How many were just forgotten? That day Yolande Carter stood for them. He wasn't a lawyer yet, but he already knew one day he'd be back in that courtroom. But next time, he'd be wearing a suit, carrying a briefcase, speaking for the voiceless, not as a defendant, but as an attorney. And when that day came, the system would remember this moment. Because it was the day the courtroom laughed, and then went silent. That day Truth walked in wearing a hoodie and told the world, you don't have to be older, richer, or louder to be right. You just have to be brave enough to speak.